The bayou is quiet tonight. Too quiet. Marcus and Danny sit in the small fishing boat, their lines cast into the dark water of the Mississippi River. It's just after midnight. The city lights of New Orleans glow faintly on the horizon. But out, here, in the water, it's almost completely dark. Almost completely silent. Danny reels in his line. Nothing. He's been getting nothing all night. He says, "Man, the fish ain't biting. You want to head back?" Marcus shakes his head. He takes a pull from a beer can. He says, "Nah, stay for a bit. I got something to tell you." Danny looks over at him. He knows that tone. That's the tone Marcus uses when he's about to say something serious. Something that matters. Marcus cracks another beer. He says, "You ever hear about the casket girls?" Danny laughs. He says, "Yeah, man, tourist shit. Ghost tour stuff." "Why?" Marcus says, "It's more real than you think, and it's closer than you think. You know that old convent? The Ursuline place in the French Quarter?" Danny nods. He's walked past it 1,000 times. Marcus says, 300 years ago, France had a problem. The colonies were failing. Men were dying. They needed women to marry the settlers, to have babies, to make the colony survive. So the King of France, Louis XIV, he decides to send women from France to Louisiana, women from orphanages, women from poor houses, women from prisons, 258 women shipped across the Atlantic like cargo. Danny listens. He's heard this before, but there's something in Marcus's voice that makes this feel different tonight. Marcus continues. They called them the casket girls because they carried small wooden chests, cassettes, with their clothes and their belongings. Tiny little boxes, man. That's all these women got to bring to start a new life in a strange land. They were shipped like prisoners, cramped below decks for months. No sunlight, barely any food. Just crammed down there in the darkness. He pauses. The water laps against the boat. When they arrived in New Orleans in 1728, people were shocked. The women were deathly pale, ghostly white. Their skin had blistered and burned under the tropical sun within minutes of stepping off the boat. They looked sick. They looked wrong. And the men who were supposed to marry them, a lot of them refused. They took one look at these pale, emaciated creatures and they said, "No, thank you." Marcus takes another drink. The Ursuline nuns took them in. They housed them in the convent in the 3rd floor, in this big room with high ceilings and shuttered windows. The nuns were going to educate them, teach them how to be proper wives, teach them Christian values. Then they'd find them husbands and everything would be fine. Danny says, "But it wasn't fine." Marcus says, "It was the opposite of fine. Men in the city started dying. Young, healthy men, just dropping dead. No wounds, no signs of violence, just dead. And they were pale, completely drained of color, like their blood had been pulled right out of their bodies. The wind picks up a little. The boat rocks gently. People started whispering. They said the women on the 3rd floor of the convent weren't what they seemed. They said they were pale because they didn't have blood. They said they'd brought something with them from France, something evil, something that fed on blood." Marcus leans forward. Legend says the nuns checked the cassettes, the trunks the women brought with them. They were empty. All of them. Completely empty. No clothes, no belongings, nothing. Like the women had brought nothing but themselves. And the nuns started to understand. The women weren't prisoners being housed at the convent. He pauses for effect. The women were the danger, and the convent wasn't protecting the women from the city. It was protecting the city from them. Danny says, "Jesus, man." Marcus says, "The nuns sealed the 3rd floor. They nailed the windows shut using blessed nails, nails that had supposedly been blessed by the Pope himself. They wanted to make sure nothing could get in or out. They wanted to make sure those women stayed locked away forever." He points toward the city. And here's the thing that makes this real, Danny. That convent, the old Ursuline Convent, it's still there, still standing. The 3rd floor is still sealed, the windows are still shuttered, and they've never been opened since. Danny says, "That's just to preserve the building, right? Like a historical thing?" Marcus shakes his head. He says, "That's what they tell the tourists. But I'm going to tell you what really happened. I'm going to tell you about Thomas Beaumont." He sets down his beer. This is the part he's been leading to. Thomas Beaumont was 23 years old. This was about 30 years ago, late 1990s. He was a smart kid, studied at Tulane. His family had money. He had everything going for him. But he became obsessed with the casket girl legend. He wanted to prove it was real. He wanted to find evidence. He thought if he could explore the third floor of the convent, he could find something. Bones, artifacts, anything that proved the legend was true. Marcus picks up his beer again. Thomas had a friend. His name was James. They'd grown up together. They were best friends. And James kept telling him, "Don't do this. Don't go looking into that place. Nothing good comes from that." But Thomas was determined. He'd made up his mind. The boat rocks a little. The water seems darker now. One night, Thomas tells James he's going to break into the convent. He's going to get into the third floor. He's going to find evidence. James says he's not going. He says it's insane, but Thomas is going anyway. Marcus's voice gets quieter. James doesn't hear from Thomas for 3 days. 3 days. So he starts asking around. He checks Thomas's apartment. Nothing. He checks with Thomas's family. They haven't seen him. James gets worried. He gets really worried because he knows Thomas went to the convent. He takes a long drink of his beer, and he knows whatever is up there, Thomas probably found it. Danny leans back in his seat. He says, "What did he find?" Marcus says, "That's the thing." James decides he's going to the convent himself. He's going to find his friend. So one night, he goes to the French Quarter. He goes to the Ursuline Convent, and he starts looking for a way inside. Marcus's hands are shaking a little as he talks. This is where the story gets fucking terrifying, Danny, because James breaks in. He gets past the ground floor. He finds the stairwell. He climbs up to the third floor, and when he gets up there, he finds the door that leads to the sealed room where the casket girls are locked away. The boat creaks, and the door is open. Danny says, "No." Marcus says, "Yes, the door is open." And James can see inside. He can see the room. There's pale light coming through the cracks in the shuttered windows, and he can see figures, shapes, dozens of them, moving in the shadows, and they turn toward him. They all turn toward him at the same time. Marcus's voice is steady, but his eyes are distant. That's when he hears his name. Thomas, his friend's voice calling to him from inside the room. "James, James, come here, come inside." But it's not Thomas's voice anymore. It's something else. It's hollow. It's hungry. And James realizes what's happened. He stops talking for a moment. The only sound is the water. Thomas went up there 3 days ago, and whatever is in that room, they've been keeping him alive, feeding on him slowly. And now they're calling to James. They want him too. Danny says, "Did he run?" Marcus says, "He ran. He ran down the stairs. He ran out of the convent. He ran through the streets of the French Quarter until he got to the river. And he's been running ever since." Marcus takes another drink. But here's where it gets worse, because the next morning, they found Thomas's body. The police found it outside the convent, on the steps. And Danny, he leans toward Danny. He was completely drained of blood, completely white, like every drop of blood had been pulled right out of his body. The boat is silent. Danny doesn't say anything. Marcus says, "The police called it unexplained. They couldn't figure out what killed him. There were no wounds, no puncture marks, no signs of struggle. The medical examiner said it was impossible. You can't just drain a body of blood without leaving evidence. But Thomas was empty." He looks out at the water, and the convent sealed the door again. The third floor is locked tight, and nobody has tried to go in there since. Nobody who valued their life anyway. Danny asks, Is this true? Is this actually a real thing? Marcus says, I wouldn't be telling you if it wasn't. James is still alive. He's in a group home in Baton Rouge. He doesn't talk much, but he confirmed everything. He said those things. In the convent, they're still there, still hungry, and they're not just locked away. They're waiting, patient, feeding on tourists who go too far, on curious people who want to explore, on anyone stupid enough to try to get to the third floor. Danny says, Why are you telling me this? Marcus says, Because you've been talking about visiting that convent on the ghost tour. You keep saying you want to go, and I need you to understand. That tour ends before dark. The tour guides don't go to the third floor. There's a reason for that. There's always been a reason for that. He points toward the city. That building is over 300 years old. Those women have been locked in that room for 300 years. And they're not dead, Danny. They can't die. Because they feed and they wait, and they're so fucking hungry. Marcus leans back in his seat. So that's why we never go over there after dark. That's why we stay away from that place. And that's why James told me to tell you this. Because if you go up those stairs, if you find that door, if you hear your name being called, you run. You run and you don't look back. The wind picks up. The boat rocks a little more. And from the direction of the city, from the direction of the old convent, there's a sound. It's distant, but it's there. A sound like wind moving through shuttered windows, or like breathing. Marcus says, We should head back. It's getting late. Danny doesn't argue. He reels in his line without waiting for a fish. The boat's engine fires up, and it starts moving. Through the dark water, away from the city, away from the old convent, and behind them, if you listen very carefully, you might have heard something. A chorus of voices. Calling, hungry, patient, waiting for the next person brave enough or stupid enough to climb those stairs and open that sealed door. 300 years they've been waiting. They can wait a little longer, but they never stop waiting. And the third floor of the Ursuline Convent remains sealed to this day, windows shuttered, doors locked, and somewhere in the darkness up there the casket girls remain, exactly as they have for centuries, pale, hungry, immortal, waiting.